For decades, China was known as the world's factory. Look around your house for a moment. Your phone charger, electronics, toys, even parts of your clothes. For years, many of those products had one label on them: Made in China. Factories stretched across massive industrial cities. Millions of workers assembled products day and night. Ships full of goods left Chinese ports and spread across the world. China didn't just manufacture products, it became the center of global production. But something unusual is happening now. Factories are quietly leaving China. Not just one or two companies. Thousands of manufacturers are slowly moving their production somewhere else. And if this trend continues, it could reshape the global economy. So what changed? Why are companies suddenly moving factories out of the country that built the modern manufacturing system? To understand this shift, we have to go back to how China became the world's factory in the first place. In the 1980s and 1990s, China opened its economy to international business. At the time, it had one major advantage that global companies couldn't ignore. Labor was extremely cheap. Millions of workers were willing to work in factories for wages far lower than in Europe or the United States. For international companies trying to produce goods at the lowest cost possible, China quickly became the obvious choice. But cheap labor wasn't the only reason. China also built enormous industrial zones designed specifically for manufacturing. Entire regions were filled with factories, warehouses, and ports connected by highways and railways. Everything companies needed to produce goods was already there. Suppliers for raw materials, assembly plants, shipping ports ready to move products anywhere in the world. This created one of the most efficient supply chains ever built. A company could design a product and have it manufactured, assembled, packaged, and shipped from China faster and cheaper than almost anywhere else on Earth. Over time, this turned China into a manufacturing powerhouse. Today, the country produces roughly 30% of the world's manufacturing output. That's more than the United States, Germany, and Japan combined. But the system that made China dominant is now starting to change. One of the biggest reasons is something surprisingly simple. China is no longer the cheapest place to manufacture. As the country developed, wages increased. Factory workers who once earned extremely low wages now earn significantly more than they did 20 years ago. For workers, this was good news. But for companies trying to keep costs low, it created a problem. Other countries started offering cheaper alternatives. Places like Vietnam, India, Indonesia, and Bangladesh began attracting manufacturers looking for lower labor costs. In many of these countries, wages are still far below China's current levels. So, companies started asking a practical question. If production can be cheaper somewhere else, why keep everything in China? And slowly, factories began moving. But rising costs alone didn't start the Great Factory Escape. A much bigger shock arrived in 2020. When the COVID pandemic hit, China introduced strict lockdowns that temporarily shut down factories and ports across the country. Production stopped, shipping slowed, supply chains around the world began breaking. Suddenly, companies everywhere realized something risky about the global economy. Too much of the world's manufacturing depended on one country. If China's factories stopped operating, entire industries could be disrupted. Car manufacturers couldn't get parts. Electronics companies couldn't finish their products. Retailers couldn't restock their shelves. For global businesses, this was a wake-up call. They had built supply chains that were extremely efficient, but also extremely fragile. So many companies started changing their strategy. Instead of producing everything in one country, they began spreading manufacturing across multiple locations. This strategy became known as China Plus One. Companies would keep some production in China, but open additional factories in other countries to reduce risk. And once factories begin moving, supply chains often move with them. A new factory in Vietnam attracts suppliers, logistics companies, and workers. Over time, an entire manufacturing ecosystem starts forming around it. That's exactly what's happening today. Vietnam has seen a huge surge in electronics manufacturing. India is expanding smartphone production. Mexico is becoming a major hub for companies supplying the United States. None of these countries are replacing China overnight, But together, they are slowly absorbing some of the manufacturing that once flowed almost entirely through China. There's another factor pushing companies to rethink their dependence on Chinese factories: geopolitics. Over the last few years, tensions between China and Western countries have increased. Trade disputes, tariffs, and restrictions on technology have made many companies uneasy. Building a factory requires billions of dollars and years of planning. Businesses don't want to risk those investments in places where political tensions could suddenly disrupt trade. So many companies are quietly diversifying their manufacturing networks. They aren't abandoning China completely, but they are making sure their entire supply chain isn't dependent on one country. For China, this shift creates a difficult challenge. Manufacturing played a huge role in the country's economic rise. Factories created millions of jobs and helped build entire cities around industrial production. When manufacturing expands, it supports transportation, housing, retail, and services around it. But when factories leave, those benefits can shrink. Even small changes in global supply chains can have ripple effects across China's economy. This doesn't mean China's manufacturing industry is collapsing. The country still has massive infrastructure, skilled workers, and one of the most advanced industrial systems in the world. But the era when nearly every global company rushed to manufacture in China may be slowly coming to an end. The global factory system is evolving. Production is spreading across multiple countries. Supply chains are becoming more decentralized. And the shift happening today could reshape the economic balance of power for decades to come. China built the world's most powerful manufacturing engine. Now the question is whether it can adapt to a world where factories no longer stay in one place forever.